a Saturday night, I turned the TV on just to see what was going on. You've been gone a while, didn't hear from you. I just want to know if you're safe and sound, 'cause I want to know if you made it out or if you're caught up in the mess. So tell me, are you okay? 'Cause I don't wanna lose you. It ain't easy 'cause I know I'm not with you, but tell me, are you okay? 'Cause I don't wanna say goodbye. I don't know what I'll do.
Welcome to Healing Connection. I'm your host, Joey McBride, and today I am honored to be joined by Molly, a dedicated first responder who shares candid insights into her job, life, and trauma experiences that are often encountered in this essential profession. These conversations are key to build awareness, empathy, and support for those who protect our communities. If you or anyone listening today needs immediate support, please call or text 988, or if you want, you can email me at htfwmidwest@gmail.com. So let's get ready and get started. Becoming a first responder. Molly, first of all, I want to say thank you for joining us. Can you start by telling us what initially inspired you to become a first responder?
Well, thanks for having me, Joey. I kind of fell into being a first responder. I was working a dead-end job. I was 20 at the time, and I had a friend who was signing up for an EMT school, or applying for an EMT school, and asked if I wanted to do it with her. And I said, why not? Let's do it. I'm not doing anything else. So we both applied to the program, and she did not make it in, but I did. And it was pretty much all downhill from there.
Oh my gosh. Okay. How did your expectations compare to the reality of the job when you first began?
I mean, going into it, I didn't have a lot of expectations because, I just did this on a whim and didn't have, a 5-year plan. I didn't grow up wanting to be an EMT, wanting to be a first responder.
Right.
Most of the time I just wanted to party and have fun. This was just another thing to try. And about halfway through the semester, I think a light bulb kind of went off for me, and I realized, this is something I'm actually really good at. Like maybe this was destined for me to fall into. And going through classes versus getting on an ambulance for the first time, you expect the job to be nothing but adrenaline, 24/7, just always running, always working, traumatic calls and super sick people. And the reality of the job is only about 20% of those calls are major calls where you're dealing with major trauma. You're dealing with people who are really, really sick. And the other 80% are people who sometimes don't understand what 911 is for, or sometimes just need somebody to be there. And that's, it's humbling to go from expecting such a high stress field to something that is high stress, but a lot of the time it's a lot lower expectations.
Right. Okay. That's quite interesting to hear, and to finally realize that, even though that I love to go out and live a fun life, but I'm also good at listening and saving lives. And that's pretty interesting. What kind of training did you receive, and do you think it was adequately prepared you for what you had to deal with for real world scenarios.
In some lights, yes, it absolutely did. I went through for my EMT license about one semester of schooling, and that included clinical time. So you were out on the ambulance, you were in the ER, working emergency cases. So you did kind of get an idea of what you were walking into. After my EMT license, I went back and got my EMT intermediate, which was another 6 months of training, even more clinical hours. I learned a lot more about pharmacology and advanced cardiac life support. We learned a lot more about the human body and how we treat different medical emergencies, whether it's a stubbed toe or a heart attack or, something as serious as a major car crash where somebody's broken a leg or lost a leg. You learn how to deal with those scenarios. I think what it really doesn't prepare you for is bedside manner and kindness. You don't realize how important those are when you're acting in this position. You think that it's all about having that medical knowledge and knowing exactly what to do when you're face to face with this life or death emergency. But a lot of it is bedside manner and learning how to talk to people.
And I fully agree, because I know have ran across nurses, not a whole lot of nurses, but mostly like doctors and things like that don't have the bedside manner that makes it even harder to deal with what you're dealing with.
Right.
And like nurses and EMTs, and now I have seen it in firefighters where, yes, their bedside is their number one priority besides making you feel better or fix whatever's wrong. But I feel as if bedside manners is what helps the healing process a lot better than just being honestly an ass.
Right. And earlier I said that it's humbling, and you have to deal with that 80% of the calls that you go on are not true emergencies. And sometimes people just need you to hold their hand just to be there with them. And I had somebody early on, an instructor early on in my training, who told me that bedside manner is important, that you can be the best medic in the world with terrible bedside manner and nobody is going to think that you're a good medic. But you can be a bad medic with great bedside manner and nobody will know that you're not good at your job, because you know how to treat people correctly and you know how to treat people with dignity and humanity and
Right.
like a human being instead of like a puzzle that you have to put together.
Right. That's so very true. Now, our first topic that we're going to talk about is daily life as a first responder. If you could walk us through a typical day for you, and what does your daily routine look like?
So currently I'm working as a dispatcher. So I started my career off as an EMT, and I did that for about 14 years. Back in 2020, when COVID hit, I was still working as an EMT, and being a diabetic with asthma, COVID scared the shit out of me. And I was concerned about my own safety, and I decided I still wanted to be in emergency services, but I wanted to switch gears a little bit. I went to dispatch, which another thing they don't talk about is that dispatch a lot of the time pays a lot better than being in the field. So that was also a big benefit for me. So now as a dispatcher, I've been doing this for 5 years. My daily routine it's pretty simple. Get up, drink my coffee, go to work, drink more coffee throughout the shift, pretty much all day long. I run on nothing but nicotine, caffeine, and adrenaline. And, you just work your way through each call. Some of them are hard, and
Right.
some of them you're just like, why are you calling? There is absolutely nothing I can do for you.
Right.
My water's out.
Yeah.
We get calls like that all the time where you're just like,
And it's interesting to know or to hear that even as a dispatcher, there are adrenaline rushes.
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in a very different way, especially coming from working EMS and then going into dispatching. It was very difficult for me because I had the tools and the knowledge to help people on the other side of the phone. But for liability reasons, we can only say and do so much without becoming a liability or putting ourselves at risk legally for any kind of problems that
Right.
happen. And it feels very helpless a lot of the time, knowing that you could do something to help, but you don't have your hands in that scenario. All you have is
Okay.
your voice. So the difference in going into dispatch is learning how to communicate effectively in a way that, again, using that bedside manner in a way that makes people feel better until somebody can get there.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's very, very, very interesting. Now, how do you balance the demands of your job and with your personal life and family?
You know, 5 to 10 years ago, when I first started this out, the job was everything. It was the center of my world. It was my entire personality. All I did was work in EMS, and everything else took a sideshow to that. It was never as important as my job and building my career and making it as far as I could in this world, especially being a woman in a male-dominated field. The last 2 or 3 years, I'd say, I've started to focus more on my life outside of work, and I'm learning to separate work from home. And that's something that's really hard to do when it's ingrained into our personality. It really shapes who we become, especially when you start out as young as I did. The majority of us do start out pretty young. So balancing work and home life for me has become really important. And I do my best. You know, my partner is very understanding and lets me come home at the end of the day. And I spend probably the first 30 minutes ranting and raving about my day, what pissed me off, what was cool, you know, everything that happened. And then I drop it after
Right.
that, you know? And I've started to really focus on having a good rest day. I feel like that really helps to combat some of the burnout and the work that you carry home with you.
Right. Probably later on, I may want to touch a little bit on something that you said, and that is burnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the most rewarding aspect of being a first responder?
Well, the obvious answer is discounts. Sometimes
Right.
you get discounts, which is pretty cool. However, the most rewarding part for me is knowing that I make a difference, knowing that I'm good at my job and I'm serving my community in some way, form, or fashion. Even if all I do is answer calls about reckless drivers, possible drunk driver, you know, a tractor trailer who's going too fast on the interstate, or there's a pothole on the interstate. You know, we get a lot of calls like that, but we do have situations where you are making a difference, an absolute difference, and people don't forget that. I get probably upwards of 100 calls a day. They only made that call one time.
Wow.
You know, they remember that voice. They remember the impact that you had on them. Even, you know, I took a call a few years back, and it was a woman whose husband had gone into cardiac arrest. And we didn't initially realize that he was in cardiac arrest because she
Right.
thought he was still breathing. And so I didn't start instructions for CPR or anything like that. I kept her calm, had her, you know, doing all of the things that we could do to help until EMS and law enforcement arrived. And then as soon as law enforcement arrived, they advised that he was unconscious and not breathing, and they started CPR. And I beat myself up for weeks thinking that, you know, if we could have started CPR as soon as she called 911, if we could have figured it out that he was not breathing, like maybe I didn't ask the right questions, maybe I wasn't clear enough. You know, at the end of the day, I did everything I could with the information that I had, but I beat myself up for weeks over that. And then I came into work one day, and there was a bouquet of flowers and a card from the daughter saying that their mother, the wife who I talked to on the phone, said that I was a voice in the darkness for her. And I got her through that day. Just knowing that I made an impact, even though I'd been beating myself up for weeks about that, was huge. And
Right.
that's, you know, we don't get flowers and cards often. That is not something that
Oh,
happens.
no.
So having that recognition and knowing that I'm making a difference is a huge part.
Okay.
the benefit of being a first responder for me.
Awesome. And I'm glad that somebody was out there that recognized that, because, like you said, that's not a common thing, and you're right, it's not. And I feel that people should do that a little bit more often. It costs what, $3.50 to send a thank you card in the mail to everyone or to that person if you happen to leave your name.
Right. And it's not necessary. We don't need that, but it's nice.
It is.
And that's, knowing that you've made a difference in somebody's day. Even if they lost somebody that's probably the worst day of her life, she still remembered me and took time to say thank you.
Right. So, what do you think are the most challenging aspects?
Definitely for like my everyday job, and even when I was in EMS, going from a really serious call where you're facing a very traumatic incident, where somebody died, or I've dealt with dead animals, and those are always the hardest calls, is when there's a dead dog. Everybody struggles with children and animals, and then your next call is somebody who is not an emergency, treating you like crap, and it's hard not to say something to them.
Oh yeah,
that is a challenge. And it's the same thing in dispatch. My last caller was being chased down on the interstate, being shot at, and my next call is somebody who's upset about traffic. Like,
I know it's not funny, but it is funny.
It is funny because people will call for the most ridiculous reasons sometimes, and an emergency is an emergency.
Right.
But it might be an emergency to them, but that doesn't mean it's an emergency to us, right? It's their emergency. So going from a call that's actually an emergency to somebody who's like, well, can you guys clear up this traffic so that I can get home? I have to pee. Or something like that, it's
right.
Like, no, I can't.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sorry that somebody's really bad day is just, it's inconveniencing you.
Yeah.
But you're just going to have to suck it up like the other 200 people sitting in that line of traffic.
Oh my gosh. Next little topic that we're going to talk about is addressing trauma and mental health. Trauma is a significant aspect of your role. Could you share how frequent exposure to trauma first impacts first responders?
So the thing about trauma is a lot of people think that it's one call that gives you PTSD, that gives you these traumatic experiences. And the truth of it is, yeah, there are some really bad calls that stick with you, and you might have flashbacks, you might have nightmares, but we face traumatic incidents on a daily basis. And I had a therapist explain it to me once when I went in for counseling, and I said, I don't feel like I deserve it. I don't feel like I deserve to feel this way. I haven't had a dead child. I haven't had to deal with anything like that. And she said, it's like trauma, being exposed to trauma on a regular basis. It's micro trauma. And think of it like water running through a canyon, that at first it's a small trickle. It's not affecting anything. You don't notice anything. But after years and years and years of that rock being exposed to that water, it starts to degrade the rock, and it starts to crumble away, and you go from having a small creek to an entire valley. And that really put it in perspective for me that, it's micro trauma.
Right.
And it's happening every day, but even if it's small trauma, it's still happening.
Right.
And it's still affecting your body.
Okay. That's an interesting way to look at it. You can visually see what this therapist was talking about.
Right. And the long-term effects of microtrauma. It was really helpful for me, and it made me a little bit more open to going to counseling and being able to talk about things, because I felt like, okay, maybe if she's putting it in this manner, maybe I do deserve to feel the way that I feel.
Right.
To get help. Versus.
Yeah. And I think that's some of where the difference between a veteran or military individual and a first responder, yes, they deal with trauma, but on a different level. And the military, going back to old school, teaches you to hide it, keep it down, don't think about it. Versus nowadays, where they want you to talk about it because of how it affects you. And the same thing with first responders. I don't know, but I would imagine that's something that they kind of tell you secretly about, is to keep the trauma buried and not deal with it, or you have to deal with it on your own.
Absolutely. And like peer support programs, debriefings, things like that have only started happening in the last 5 to 10 years. And EMS and law enforcement, dispatch, search and rescue, all of it's been around for decades,
Right.
And we're just now starting to open up to mental health and taking it more seriously.
Wow.
Which I'm glad we are.
Yeah, I am too, because you've got to find some release.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
And that's how you avoid ending up as this old crusty farmer paramedic who hates his life because he never learned to deal with any of that.
Right. Wow. Have there been specific incidents that deeply impacted you personally?
Absolutely. There's been tons of calls that I took home with me and I worried over, just like I was talking about earlier,
Right.
that one CPR call where we should have started CPR earlier. That could have been the difference between life and death.
Right.
And granted, I don't think it would have made a difference. Mortality rates with cardiac arrest are pretty high. But there's a chance, and every call that you work, you're always afterwards running through everything. Could I have done this better? Could I have done something different? What could I have done? I think what really the biggest thing that I have struggled with was a traumatic experience that caused me to leave the fire department. That was the big trauma for me, where I'll probably never work at a fire department ever again.
Right.
And it was not because of a traumatic call. It was because of the fire department and people
Right.
I was working with. And it was a good old boys club. And I was pretty much set up for an assault by one of my coworkers. And when I pressed charges against the said individual, I was ostracized by the department and completely ostracized from my all-male crew who decided to take sides and,
Right.
and I completely ostracized me from the department. I lost all of my faith in my coworkers and the brotherhood that we're supposed to share.
Right.
The friendships that we're supposed to share. And when you don't trust your partners, you just can't work under that scenario.
Man, I'm very sorry to hear that. I really am. I hate when things like that take place. It sucks. It really does. And there is no easier way to say it than that.
Yep.
So how do you and your colleagues support each other after traumatic events?
So we do a debriefing a lot of the time, which is essentially a collection of peers that, it's completely confidential.
Right.
It's covered by laws that are similar to attorney-client privilege. So anything you say in that room stays in that room. It can't be investigated. People in the room are not allowed to share that information with anybody else, which can be helpful. Unfortunately, on the dispatch side of things, we're not included in a lot of those.
Wow.
Because we didn't see anything.
Right.
So it can't be as traumatic for us, right? Which is not true.
No, because it's mental.
It's all mental warfare.
Because you can't visually see it, but in your brain is what's doing the visual effect.
Exactly. So we're making up our own scenario in our head and seeing our own scenario in our head. And sometimes we do see the aftermath.
Right.
Like sometimes we do have access to see the the photos that were taken, and we see the fatal reports. So if somebody died, we get to see the reports. We're actually responsible for sending those out to like the upper
Of the echelon.
brass.
Yeah.
And so the supervisors and everything like that, like within the center, I am good about talking about things that are bothering me.
Right.
I've become comfortable with that. And there's still a lot of people in the field that struggle with that. Okay. I always try to recognize if I have a coworker who is struggling with something.
Right.
And even when I was at the fire department, we held our own little debriefing after traumatic calls. And, it's kind of funny because we can go on one cardiac arrest and I'll be, joking and laughing afterward. And it sounds cold and callous, but it's just, it's the job. We see death every day. And then there are other calls where, like I said earlier, like dead animals. Like we had to pull a dog that had drowned out of the river. And that was traumatic for all of us. Went back just completely melancholy and sad, and
right.
We all talked about it afterwards. And then we're at the cardiac arrest 3 hours later, and then everybody was fine.
Right. Wow.
So just recognizing that somebody is struggling and being able to pick up on those cues and try to get them to talk about it.
Right.
Or reach out to somebody who's professional.
Okay. So what coping strategies have you found that are most effective in managing the emotional toll of the job?
For me, therapy. I see a counselor every 2 weeks. I highly recommend it for anybody who is a first responder of any kind. I think that it's crucial personally. I think that everybody should see a therapist, no matter their role in this life. It's good for the soul to be able to talk about those things. Outside of that, I find things that I enjoy. I enjoy reading. It allows me an escape from the world I'm living in, and I get to soak myself and immerse myself in a different world, in a different timeline with a different person. I enjoy crafts a lot. I found like the diamond paintings. I swear I can feel my blood pressure going down when I'm doing that. I am in my own little world and I disappear to everybody outside of it. And
right.
It's just finding little things that you enjoy doing and keep your hands busy. That's a big one. Just keeping your hands busy to cope instead of, keeping your hands and your mind active.
Right.
Can really help with a lot of that mental stress.
Interesting. I don't think I ever heard anybody say that diamond painting or diamond dotting was essential.
And it is for me. I love it.
What advice would you give someone entering the field about managing their mental health?
Talk about it. Talk about it with your spouse, with your best friend. If you don't feel like you can talk to those people, find a therapist. They're covered by most insurances. You have to meet certain requirements with it, and then most employers have an EAP, which is an employee assistance program, where you can at least get 5 counseling sessions for free, and then they can refer you to an outside counselor. Highly recommend anything like that. And then finding coping mechanisms, things
right.
that can help you relax, help you feel better, and expand your mind so that you're not just stuck in this constant wheel of trauma. And you don't think you're going to need it. You think that you're going to be stronger than everybody else, but
right.
We're all human.
Wow.
We all face the same struggles.
Okay.
Get help early.
Oh, gosh, yes. Next little topic is community awareness and support. So how can communities better understand and support the emotional needs of a first responder?
My number one thing on that is do not ask people what the worst thing they've ever seen is, or what's the worst call they've ever been on, because you just took their box of compartmentalized trauma and you opened it up, threw it against a wall, and said, "Let's play."
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing, and it's every single person I've ever met that I said, "I'm a dispatcher," or "I'm an EMT." It's like, what's the worst thing you've ever done? Not ever done, ever seen.
Yeah.
And that just, and depending on the day, you're going to get a different answer.
Right.
And sometimes it's going to be funny, and sometimes it's going to shake you to your core if you're not used to
hearing
about that.
Yeah.
And it's traumatic for us to have to relive that with somebody who doesn't understand it.
Right. I know that because that's kind of like with the veterans. depending on what your job is, especially if you're like frontline, and the biggest common question is, did you shoot somebody? And it's like, well, yeah, it's my job, And then you tell how funny it was, and they're like, dude, you're sick. And it's like, no, I'm not. This is my daily life. This is what I see. This is what I know, and this is how I deal with it. And people don't understand how a certain question can really change the dynamic of how people see us.
Exactly. And that's, it's something I've been guilty of with veterans, is asking that exact question. Have you ever killed anybody?
Right.
And then I started to really think about that kind of question, and, the things that people ask me as a first responder. And I'm like, man, I'm doing the exact same thing that I hate when people do it to me.
Right.
And
yeah.
Like that's the thing when you're dealing with first responders, when you're dealing with veterans, if they want to tell you about it, they're going to.
Right.
But until then,
don't ask.
Don't ask.
Yeah, because you never know what, like you said, you never know what kind of answer you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
And you're probably going to get it most likely raw.
Yeah.
And
because we don't know any other way.
Yeah. And I honestly believe like 95% of people are not ready for what we have to say. So
Absolutely not.
It's so interesting. But yeah, because like the firefighters that I've ran across, or even the EMTs, I never ask them that because I know I would not like that asked of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and come up with, what was one of your favorite calls, or what is something that you took away from a call that you went on.
Right. Tell me a funny call.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make light of it.
Yeah.
Because you don't get that.
Don't ever bring the darkness first. Oh, Lord, no, because you will be in so much trouble. What are some common misconceptions you wish people understood better about your role?
And I think this is something we kind of touched on earlier, but keep in mind, be patient with us, that the last call we went on may have been really bad, and we don't get to go home for the day. We don't get to work something super traumatic, like child death. I've seen people who worked a child's death that they had kids of the same age at home, and then had to get it together and go on to the next call.
Right.
Keep that in mind, especially for me, when you're calling into 911, we might be working a fatal accident where there's children involved. And then you call me to complain about the traffic and say, like, when are you guys going to clear this up? Why are you not working hard enough? Blah,
right.
blah, blah. We are raw at that point.
Yeah.
Like, just give us some patience and keep in mind that, it seems like an emergency to you. It's your emergency, but we do this all day, every day.
Right.
That, I would say, is the biggest misconception, is that we don't get to go home when things get bad. We have to
stay for the rest of the shift.
Yeah. And there's a very good chance you're talking to somebody who hasn't gotten to eat or pee in 12 hours. So please be patient.
Yeah.
We're hangry.
Oh, yeah. Now, something that I said I would like to talk about a little bit more before we go wrap this up, but burnout. I know that is a big thing from the research that I was doing, looking up this stuff, and that burnout was one of the top things that first responders go through.
Mm-hmm.
What is... How do you look at burnout, and how realistic is it?
Very, very realistic. I probably this year have dealt with burnout twice, where I was, you give everything. You walk through that door and my employer gets 100% of me for that entire shift. And then you do that 4 days a week and you get 3 days off, and then you go back and you do it all over again, where you're getting 100% of yourself. And a lot of jobs are not like that, where, you don't go in and give 100%, because it's not just 100% of your working brain. It's your emotional brain. It's taking an emotional toll on you. And you get compassion fatigue when you're talking to people who are going through emergencies and you have this compassion for them to want to help them. You start to throw all of your emotions into that on a regular basis, and you go home and your cup is completely empty,
Right.
and it's hard to get a sip of water if you're drinking from a dry cup. And sometimes 3 days off just does not feel like enough. And luckily at my job now, we get a lot of vacation time, but we don't get PTO days like most people do.
Right.
We put in for a full year, and I'll take 2 weeks off at a time, 3 times a year to combat that. And like, luckily, the last time I was really burned out was right at the end of like a 3-month stretch. And then I got 2 weeks off of work. And I did not know how bad I needed that time off, and how bad it was affecting me. I mean, you deal with all kinds of emotional turmoil when you're burnt out, and anger. It's mostly anger for me. The majority of my emotions come out through anger. I get frustrated. I get angry at myself. I get angry at my coworkers. I get angry at people calling 911 every day, who don't have any compassion for anybody but themselves.
Right.
So burnout is real. Every single one of us faces it, and it kills a lot of people. It kills a lot of first responders, and they're physically weary. Physically, we have one of the highest rates of suicide, just like the veteran population. I don't know. I know it's 22 a day for veterans. I don't know how many a day it is for first responders, but it's a lot.
Wow.
We face a lot of mental health challenges.
Right.
And we also face a lot of medical issues. I mean, I'm 34 and I take high blood pressure medication, and I have for the past 10 years. And while some of that is related to previous medical conditions, a lot of it's related to the stress I deal with at work and the constant cortisol running through my system, the adrenaline that we are getting on a daily basis.
Right.
And, I have a friend who had a heart attack at 35 and now has to carry nitro with him everywhere he goes just in case he has another heart attack.
Wow.
We deal with a lot of health problems and a lot of mental health problems due to the stress of the job.
Wow. Okay. I mean, most of us kind of know about the stressors of the job, because you know that the stuff on TV is not real, but yet nobody hears about it. Like the military, is kept under the rug a lot, but yes, first, I'm glad that you said it, that first responders are now looking more into the suicide rate, the more burnout rate, the more mental health rates that is needed because of the job. And it, just like the military, it took years for them to actually bring it to the forefront, because if you go back through history, part of World War I and World War II, they dealt with shell shock. They didn't realize that they were dealing with PTSD at that time, and it has gone on for years. Even up to this present day, they're still looking and doing research just on PTSD. I know within the last 5, maybe 6 years, they're starting to look at TBI. And I know that, I don't know if first responders have to deal with TBI, but as far as the mental health is, they do. And it sounds like it's becoming more and more better, or looked at as something, not a negative thing.
And they're starting to, like I said, we're starting to implement peer support programs. Myself, I'm CISD certified, which is critical incident stress debriefing, which also makes me a member of peer support in my department. It's something that's always been important to me. And I've had friends that went into the peer support program as well, because they also, want to prevent suicide. And I myself have dealt with suicidal ideations, and I know that 90% of other first responders have dealt with the same thing.
Mm.
And a lot of that is not treating the mental health. And,
Right.
it is, I hate to say it's a male dominated field, and men tend to
Cover it up.
Yep, because men are taught to hide weakness.
Yes.
We're not allowed, y'all aren't allowed to cry or show any weakness or vulnerability, versus women, we're raised to cry and be vulnerable. And I have found that has been a lifesaver for me, as being able to be vulnerable with my peers and the people around me. And it makes me sad that it's not the same way for men in the field. I think that a lot would change if we could be more vulnerable with each other.
I agree with that. I think so too.
Yeah.
It really would. Now, in closing reflections, let me get that right. Yeah. As we wrap up today, our final thoughts, what are your final thoughts or message would you like to share with our listeners?
I think the major thing is it's a wonderful field. It is a lot of fun. Like I said, it has completely molded and shaped my personality. And I was pretty set in stone already by the time I got into it, but it's a wonderful field full of wonderful people. And you do run into really shitty people along the road. As I talked about earlier, I just was one of the unlucky ones that fell in line with a bad department.
Right.
But it doesn't happen to everybody. It's a lot of fun. It's very rewarding. But you have to take care of yourself. If you don't take care of yourself, then you're not going to survive.
Right.
Simple as that.
It is very true.
Just get help. Get help early on.
Yes. Oh, yes. That is something that I honestly cannot encourage enough through this podcast, is if you are struggling, it doesn't matter with what, please look for help. And if you don't know where to go, then go ahead and text 988 and talk to somebody. And maybe you could propose the question to them and they could help you in the right direction, or if you feel embarrassed about calling them, talk to somebody, hopefully in your field, that you can relate, that they can kind of relate a little bit to what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Molly, I want to say very much thank you for sharing your invaluable perspective and experiences. To everyone listening, again, please remember that it's okay to seek support, and you are never, ever alone. Again, I will stress this, and not near enough. Text 988, please. If you feel uncomfortable about that, or you would like to know more insight or where you can get help, you can email me at htfwmidwest@gmail.com. And as always, I will have your six. Until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected. Signing out.
'Cause I